So in this episode, I speak with Barnaby. Barnaby talks about his condition, which is psoriatic arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis. He talks about his life, wanting to be in the military, up until he realised with the condition, unfortunately, it was something he just couldn't do. And we talk about the mental impacts of that. But he is really, really inspiring. He moved out to Canada and he took on a whole new sport in snowboarding, and now he's really pushing to lead the way for people with arthritis within the sport. Right, Barnaby, thanks very much for coming on the podcast.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I think this is obviously, for me, the first time I'm putting out a podcast that's online. So, Barnaby as well.
Yeah, going international.
Yeah, exactly, all the way up to Canada. But no, I do appreciate it. We've had a kind of, pre-conversation, talking a bit about the condition, obviously, a bit of an introduction to you. Arthritis, very similar to myself, diagnosed as psoriatic arthritis, with some elements of ankylosing spondylitis in there as well.
Yeah.
And you are obviously in Canada. You've moved over to Canada, and you've got quite a story really in terms of where you're up to, relating to your sport, which is snowboarding, which you found has obviously helped with the condition and something that you can actually do, which I think a lot of people with this with arthritis and stuff, the whole reason for the podcast is trying to find things that you can do and enjoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd really just want to jump into it and go back to probably the beginning part, which was beginning out a little bit around your diagnosis, the lead up to that, and what were some of the signs and symptoms that got you to that point?
Yeah, for sure. So I always laugh because quite ironically, the first ever indication I have of a diagnosis was actually when I was snowboarding. When I was about 16, 17, I was snowboarding in Europe, and my ankles and feet were just in agony after about 2 or 3 days on the mountain. And it just was really, really sore. Didn't think anything of it. So obviously, as most people know, if you ski or snowboard, the boots aren't the most comfy anyway, so I kind of assumed it was that. And I remember at the end of that holiday, I actually switched to skis just because ski boots are much more like a cast, a lot more rigid. So I thought that might kind of secure the ankle up a bit. And that was back in 2017. And then from that point onwards, that's kind of when it just started getting worse and worse, and the symptoms started getting more and more noticeable. So at 18, I joined university, and at that point I started playing a lot of rugby, and again the thing that I was always noticing was my feet. So we were playing on an artificial turf at university, and just after every training session, every game, my feet were just in agony. I had everyone tell me it was plantar fascia or plantar fasciitis, and Achilles tendonitis. Those were kind of the two big things that everyone was saying. So I did the classic and just attacked it with physio, just tried to do everything I could. I think for about 2 years, I was doing about 2 hours of physio every single day, just to no avail. Nothing was getting better. And that was kind of the point where we started having more warning signs and needed to dig a bit deeper. So that's when I then kind of did the blood tests, went deeper dive into the condition itself, or into the symptoms rather, and then that's where we found the HLA-B27 gene, which I'm sure lots of people with this condition have. And then that was kind of the identification process, and then I was fully diagnosed when I was 20, so my final year of university. And that, as you said, got the diagnosis of psoriatic arthritis at first, and then left university, and that is kind of where everything changed for me. So before going to university, I had a scholarship with the Royal Marines. So from the ages of about 11 onwards, I just had dedicated a lot of my life to getting as fit as I can to join the Marines, with lots of running, lots of endurance stuff, as I'm sure most people are aware. And that was always my goal, was to go through university, and then as soon as I'd got my degree, join the Royal Marines. And in third year, after being diagnosed, I had to go back to Lympstone, where the Marines are based, and do a medical. And that was in the medical, where it became very apparent that a lot had changed through 3 years prior, when I had done all the interviews initially and the fitness tests. And that's where it was, yeah, the kind of, they'd lifted the curtain, everything was very real, that suddenly all the life that I wanted to live just wouldn't be possible at all. Which was, as you can imagine, very, very tough.
Yeah.
And that's initially where the Marines were actually great. And I had a liaison officer who spoke to me one on one, and he was just really honest. And he said, "Is there anything that you've wanted to do? And if there is, take a year off, go and do it now and try and get better." Which was awesome for me, because I'd thought, oh, great, I have actually always wanted to do a ski season, and I knew that I would have never been able to with my initial plan of going straight to university, straight to join the Marines. So this was actually a nice little kind of break that I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
But then on that year, when I was on the ski season, that's where it became really apparent that it wasn't going to be a year-long fix of just kind of sorting my diet out, sorting my lifestyle out, sorting things out, and that it was going to be a much bigger problem. So whilst I was in Canada, I was already communicating with the Royal Marines, basically just saying, I know I was on scholarship and I know I have to come back, but plain and simple, I just can't do it. And as soon as I let them know my diagnosis, then they obviously understood as well.
Yeah.
So because of that, I lost the scholarship, in the sense of I couldn't join the Royal Marines after university. But what was great about that is it had already given me the opportunity to kind of get a glimpse into what my life is now, which is the Canada side of things. So after just doing that first season, I came back, and this was where it was actually really tough for me, because I remember vividly, I actually didn't know whether I would be able to snowboard when I first left to Canada, and that was probably my biggest just step into the unknown. But in my head, I couldn't run, which was one of my biggest things. I couldn't play rugby, which was for sure my biggest sport. I'm really big into just gym and fitness, and at that point, I couldn't really work out either. And in my head, I was kind of seeing all these almost characteristics of myself, actually, because they were so important to me, just suddenly just being knocked off and not being able to do them. And that's why I thought, damn, I need something. So that's where I really just took that step into the dark and thought, don't know if I'll be able to, don't know if my feet will hold up, but I'll at least give snowboarding a try, because if I don't, it'll probably always be in the back of my mind that I could have. And as well, I was just very lucky, and my body really took to it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just because it's not impact. So running, obviously, anything is just constant impact on my joints. And unless I fall over or make a mistake, usually it's not very high impact, because you're just sliding on the snow. And yeah, that for me is when just everything changed for the better, because suddenly, up until that point, everything with the diagnosis was doors being shut in my face, and stuff that I'd always wanted to do now not being accessible, or being heavily, heavily changed. And then this was the first thing where I suddenly just thought, wow, I don't feel different. Well, obviously I feel different, but I don't feel
Yeah.
as dissimilar in other walks of life as I do to other people. And yeah, it's just not only a great thing to do physically, in terms of just keeping me fit, keeping me active, keeping my body moving. Mentally, it was just something else. Just finally being able to see that light at the end of the tunnel, think, awesome, this is something that I can now really focus on, really get to. And that's what then kind of evolved into me thinking, wow, well, this is something that I had no idea that I'd be able to do. And I was quite depressed back in the UK, and a lot of that was because I didn't have the vice of sport or exercise to kind of release a lot of the stress and the tension. And suddenly I'd kind of found it with snowboarding. And that's why now my goal in the snowboarding kind of realm is to really build up my own profile and get to the point where I'd become a sponsored athlete, and then raise awareness and basically allow everyone who was in my position to know and to see that you can do it.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely one of those sports where there are barriers to entry, be that cost or location or just not thinking you can do it, which is, I'm sure, lots of people like me. And yeah, I think just being able to show them that there are sports out there, and even if it's not necessarily snowboarding, if it's something else, whether it be a water sport or another snow sport, or just something that's not kind of mainstream sport. And that is just, for me, it's just phenomenal, because it just gives that little bit of hope, which I think so many people need, and that can really be all that it takes, is just that one bit of hope to show you that you can actually continue doing the things you love, and then suddenly it seems like a very ordinary beast and not this thing that dictates your whole life. So
So,
yeah, I think that was very important for me.
yeah, absolutely. I think you've kind of gone through a timeline there, and um, I think we spoke as well, didn't we, about the fact that there's definitely like a gap and a space where, so we're not classed as like disabled. So there's certain things like Paralympics and other bits and bobs that you can't do, but we also sometimes, not to say everyone can't, but a lot of time you might not be able to compete with people that like maybe not have the condition which is affecting the joints. So there's like a little space in the middle where we don't really kind of there's nothing really there to go at. And you kind of said it
Completely.
as well. It's having that outlet and it's having something that you can definitely do. Just going back to when you spent a lot of your life from 11 years old up until 20 years old and so on, dedicating your time to being in the military. Obviously, that must have played a huge mental impact on you when you kind of come to the realization that you couldn't do that. Like, what was when you say you got depressed and stuff? I mean, what was the mental impacts of that whole situation? Because you've spent so much time going for that and dedicating your life.
Of course, yeah. So this is where it was actually, I imagine, very different for me. So when I was first diagnosed and first got the news about everything, I remember that all of my kind of pain or anguish towards it wasn't actually to do with the diagnosis, and it was all to do with me not being able to do this life that I'd always kind of dreamed and imagined and really worked hard for. And back at the time, I think that made it really, really tough, because instead of just attacking it as seeing this thing that I now have to live with, I was very much seeing it as, wow, this is all the things that's taken away from me. Whereas now I don't think about the kind of that life at all, and being in terms of joining the Marines, and much more just kind of coming to terms with the diagnosis. But I think it all, as you can kind of imagine, I was just so set on this one path, and genuinely everything I'd done in my life was to kind of get me to that end goal and to go through this path. And I was the only person in my age in the whole of the UK to get this scholarship. So it was a very hard thing to do. I put so much effort into it. And also, I had sacrificed a lot of things through not doing at school or younger just so I could get to this. So I think that's kind of why initially to be honest, I felt quite hard done by. And
Yeah.
I just felt undeserved. I think the same as everyone feels, kind of like the why me, all of that stuff, and just felt, wow, this is truly unfair. And I think a lot of the reasons I felt it is because I was looking at myself and seeing how fit I was and how much time I was dedicating to my body and fitness. And then I remember it was actually lovely. I spoke to my sister about it, and she said, I wish I could take what you have, because I probably wouldn't even notice that I had it, because obviously some people's lifestyles are so different and they're not kind of trying to push themselves and do this. So that was another thing I really felt as well. It's just like, oh, why, if want to live this lifestyle of pure drive and outside and to use my body as much as I can, I just felt so hard done by that I had to be dealt that hand, and not someone who, say, worked a 9 to 5 desk job
Yeah.
and then once they got home sat on the sofa all day and was very content with doing that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that was the more painful pill for me to swallow, was kind of just the why me. And I think that then unfortunately came hand in hand with quite a lot of anger. So instead of me dealing with it with just as I should have dealt with it and face value, I think because I saw it in that regard and life being taken away from me, I then had a lot of anger. And honestly, I think it's kind of only at this point now where that anger has kind of left me and I don't see it that way. So it's a good 4 year kind of journey. And I think that was very important into, because you'll never heal or get better whilst you're angry, or whilst you're blaming it on someone else, or whilst you're asking those questions of why me, all of those. And I think that was really key for me. The minute that I switched the mindset from why me, this makes me angry, this is awful, to suddenly, wow, look at everything this has changed, and looking at it as a positive. And now I truly do actually think that being diagnosed is probably the best thing that's happened in my life, because this last 4 years have been tough, but they've been phenomenal. And I wouldn't have had that if I didn't have this kind of kick and this change in my life. So yeah, I think there's definitely been that shift in mindset. And I do think the anger is one of the hardest things to come to terms with, because for so many people, it's just thrown at them. Their whole life changes often overnight, and everyone's human. That makes anyone angry, annoyed, frustrated. And I just think, yeah, it's very important to try and feel those feelings. For sure, you have to, but try and just understand that whilst you're feeling those feelings, it's very hard to get better and focus on yourself. And there does have to be a shift. But
Yeah.
as I'm sure everyone's gone through it, I do think you have to kind of feel that, and you do have to feel a bit sorry for yourself, at least for a time, just so that you can truly understand, yes, I have this for life, it's always going to be with me, and then just actually attack it. Because I don't think with any chronic disease, you can't be in denial in the slightest, just because you have to live with it every single day. And if you're in denial, you're just going to make your life harder.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to go through a certain path, and listening to you, I know we spoke, but it's very similar to my path. And I think there might just be a common theme there, that that's what you just have to go through. There's so many stages from when you get it.
Yeah,
And you are right. You are just, it's thrown at you. You're not expecting it. It's can come at any time. And then when you've got it, I think it takes that many years to actually get yourself to a certain place where you are now. And it was the same for me. Like, I think now, sitting here speaking to you, doing this, doing the podcast, doing everything that I do now, I would never have had this opportunity. I would never have thought
yeah,
to do this. It never would have entered in my mind, because why would it?
yeah, of course.
To do something like this, because I hadn't had to go through it. And the fact that I've gone through that, and you are right, you get to a certain point where it's time to actually turn it around and attack it. And you can't just sit there anymore and think, why have I got this? Why can't I do this? You need to look at the things that you can actually do. And you need to go after
Exactly.
things, because that's, what life's all about. You've got to enjoy yourself, and there's only so many years. Like, could I imagine sitting here for the rest of my life being, angry about having the condition? No, that's literally not going to do nothing for me. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's exactly like that. You've got to turn it around somewhere, and I don't think you can force that. I think you have to go through some pain. You have to go through lots of trial and error. I think you have to go through, um, yeah, things that just don't work, and all different emotions, to eventually get to that point when, and for you, snowboarding was that thing that kind of triggered that shift in your
Definitely.
mind.
Yeah.
Where do you at
Yeah.
now then, in terms of the snowboarding? Because this is something I know you're so passionate about, leading the way when it comes to um, showing people what you can do, opening that door, and kind of filling that little gap that we spoke about. I know you want to be sponsored. I know that's something you really want to do. So where are you at now, and where's that drive at?
So I'm really glad you touched on that kind of the grey area, or the no man's land that I like to call it, because I think that's another one of the hardest things for people with what we have to kind of try and conquer sport. Because I think if you're trying to do it at any kind of high level, it definitely does make the motivation harder, knowing that you almost don't know where you fit from the offset. So as you said, not being able to go into the Paralympics and kind of really compete professionally that way, and then also just with my body, I do kind of have to face the fact that I also won't be able to compete with the normal professionals, just because my body's very, very different to theirs. I need more rest. I need more recovery. I can't push it quite as hard. So then we do end up in this little no man's land. And that's why I kind of felt like I really had to kind of pick up the reins by myself and try and almost pave a new path, so that anyone who has any kind of hidden or chronic illness, or anything that makes them different from the ordinary but doesn't make them quite qualify for the Paralympics, say, I feel that we need a new realm almost for people to compete in. And that's why, yeah, I'm really trying to push for the sponsorship side of things, just to increase the publicity, to get that message to as many people as possible. Because I know that snowboarding is still a very small sport. It's still up and coming. As I said, there's so many barriers to entry. So because of that, I feel like one of the big things is just kind of letting people know that it's out there and pushing it. And that's where I think a sponsor will really help, just because it'll be a platform bigger than myself. And obviously, anyone who follows that platform has already got some kind of interest or inclination towards snowboarding. So they're already the target markets. But yeah, so it's obviously difficult for winter sport because it's very seasonal. So now I'm in towards the end of May, obviously, and going to have to wait a good few months before I can crack on again on the snow. So this kind of period is when I'm really going to be trying to just do the groundwork, basically, of just contacting companies, contacting people, really just do the more admin side of things, just to try and set up a foundation. And then come the winter, that's when I really just try and get my head stuck down, snowboard as much as possible to improve myself, and then film as much as possible as well. And then I would ideally just love to get to a point where I can be as transparent with both aspects of my life. So kind of do 50% showing all the snowboarding and all the great things that snowboarding can give you, the smile that you have on your face, so all of that side. And then also just be really transparent about medication regime, lifestyle choices, dieting, basically all the other things that go hand in hand with the disease to make it all possible. Because that's something that I have been very aware of, is I love snowboarding and it's helped so much. But to do it, you do have to, of course, like anything, sacrifice other areas so that I can do it as much as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at now. It's just laying the foundation whilst we're in the off season, and then come the season, really try and push as much as the body will let me, just to get content out there and yeah, kind of just spread the message of both how great snowboarding is and also just how great any entry to sport is for people with any kind of hidden chronic disability, really.
Um, when you think about Canada, you think about it being cold. Now, someone like me, naturally, I would think, okay, so my conditions definitely better when it's hot. So in the summer, when we get like a little bit of sun in the UK, it's good. Like now, I can run,
Yeah,
I can do
feel
things.
good.
I definitely feel
Nice, yeah.
much better. So when I think about moving away, I think about moving to a hot climate. How does the cold affect you? Does it affect you in a negative way, or actually is it a positive for the condition for you personally?
I actually think it's a positive. So I know lots of people have the same, the cold weather affects them, but I found myself that humidity and heat really affects me. So I feel much worse, actually opposite to you, when the heat
Okay.
and the sun comes up. That's when I really suffer. And it's much more energy as opposed to joints and pain itself. So yeah, when the sun comes out, I just feel like my energy bar gets halved immediately. Whereas in the winter, it's almost the opposite. I feel like I've got a lot more energy and can kind of go out there and get cracking.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I do feel lucky on, because I know lots of people are in that same boat where the cold affects them.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I got quite lucky, because it definitely helps me. And then the other huge thing for Canada in terms of helping the disease and the lifestyle as well is just kind of the healthcare system out here and the medication. So I remember another one of the points that I left the UK is just because I went to my doctor and he essentially told me, you need to be on this medication, which was biologics, but we can't put you there until I think you wait 2 years or it progresses up your spine. It was one of the nice guidelines that I'm sure everyone's had to deal with. And yeah, hearing that from a doctor telling me to my face, you need this, but we can't put you on it. I just thought, this is crazy. I don't want to have any bureaucracy when it's my health and life that is in the balance. So that was a real turn off for me. And I was also misdiagnosed in the UK as well. I think one of the things that's quite tough, and I'm sure you'll get this too, is when you don't look like you have any kind of mobility issue, people somewhat just disregard you from the offset. So they look at you, they see you walk in, they see that you don't have excess fat on you and you look quite healthy. And then I think they can be very quick to judge and just assuming that you're very normal. And I experienced that in the UK as well. And I think that just kind of made me doubt a lot of the healthcare, if I'm being truly honest.
Yeah.
And then coming here, the first time I saw the doctor, she gave me the drugs that I needed, or the medication that I needed to be on. And then, yeah, it's just such a different lifestyle. So I would say that if people are in my position and they're needing the heavier medication or those last steps for disease modifying or the biologics, and they're finding it really tough to get on it in England, I just would always encourage just to look at a different avenue, and if that is moving abroad, not necessarily Canada, or just doing something a bit different. I think it's very easy when you're diagnosed with us to feel like you're trapped, whether that be trapped in a country or your lifestyle or your job or whatever. And I think it obviously requires more effort, but it's still very doable to kind of get out there and do it. So, and it's one thing that
Yeah.
I do somewhat joke about to people, and I do often say that if I can move abroad, anyone can, because with having to locate blood tests, hospitals, pharmacists, specialists, everything, sort out all of that, it's obviously a faff, but it's so easy and so worth it. And I'm sure that's probably a barrier for lots of people as well, because it can seem so overwhelming and really seem like you're stuck and can't travel, especially with medication that you need in the fridge, or
Yeah.
just really specific things, which I'm sure the everyday public probably hasn't thought of. Yeah, so I'd really implore people to kind of look at that as well, and don't just always try and make your picture wider. Because even if a doctor says, right, this is the only alternative, I'm sure that there's probably another one if you're just a bit more creative. And I think that helped me a lot as well, because I think it just felt a lot like I was taking the disease again by the reins and into my control, rather than just letting a doctor tell me exactly how to live my life and what I have to do, basically.
You touched on it before, which was talking about things like lifestyle changes, diet, obviously the medication and so on. What's your current position when it comes to these things? So if you was to give some quick snips into what works for you with the condition, looking at things like, is there anything specifically you do around the nutrition? Is there anything else around your training away from the snowboarding that helps you? And also as well, what kind of medication is it that you are on at the moment?
Of course, yeah. So I think the way that I try and do it is just really, really intuitively. So both for training and for eating. So I am in the lucky position where I've worked out for a long time, so I know of the kind of the classic splits and the breakdown of workouts. So in terms of my workout regime, I just play it entirely by my body. So if the day before I might really be thinking, yeah, I want to really get a good leg session in the gym tomorrow, but then that next day I might wake up with really stiff legs, and then instead of kind of dwelling on, oh God, my legs are sore, and really grinding out a horrible leg session that might hurt me, I just switch it up and think, great, well, my upper body doesn't hurt, so let's crack on with this, and then tomorrow my legs might be fine and we can go back to them. So I think that played a big part in just not being too strict on yourself and thinking, right, this is my plan, I have to stick to it. Just our bodies are different to other people's, so we have to treat them like that, essentially. And then that goes hand in hand of eating as well. So I've actually recently now been just having my first kind of food of the day very late in the afternoon, and that's not through any kind of fasting or diet method. It's just because I don't feel hungry until then, and then eat around then. And I've noticed a real shift in my energy then, is that for me personally, not eating throughout the day and then eating later, I just feel like my energy levels are much, much higher than when I used to eat throughout the day. Doesn't really affect pain or anything like that, but definitely affects the energy. And then I'm also very conscious of, just because I know my joints will deteriorate, I'm always conscious of just trying to have as much protein as possible. Basically, just because in my head I just think about, if my joints will deteriorate, I just want to make the muscle around it just as dense and solid as possible.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of the main two ways I attack it. And the exercises as well that I do, again, it's just very much what feels good at the time. So my left wrist is often gives me one of the most problems on my body parts.
Yeah.
So I found recently barbell movements I find really tough. So instead of just trying to dwell on that and smash barbell movements, I've just switched to dumbbell, switched to machines,
Yeah.
and I'm sure there could be a point where that gets a bit sore and I'll just switch back. And then also as well, I think the other thing that I focus on with joints is just make everything lighter. I think everyone in the gym has a tendency just to the classic ego lift or go a bit heavy. And I
Yeah.
think with bad joints, it's such an eye opener of not worth it. Go really slow, be nice to your body. So I think that's a key thing as well, of just not necessarily doing the best exercise and just doing the one that's best for your body at that time. And
Yeah.
that time can literally be that particular hour. So I think that's the real key thing, is just be free and loose with it, and don't really try and make a regimented plan. And more importantly, don't get upset if you can't stick to that regimented plan, because I think that's a lot of where it all comes from, is just having that, making it part of your life basically, because it will be part of your life for the rest of it.
Yeah, it's having
So I think, yeah,
expectations sometimes, isn't it, on yourself, and then once you could realize you can't do that, it's you kind of fall back into that anger stage again. So yeah, when it
exactly,
comes
yeah.
to medication, then what's the medication that you're currently on now that works for you?
So, interestingly, about 10 days ago, I actually came off one of my medications, which was a huge step for me. It's the first time I've been off that medication since I was diagnosed, so since I was 2021. And it was my daily medication, so the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, and then kind of other drugs to minimize the side effects of that one. So for me, that was a huge step, being able to come off that medication, because like anyone, I don't think anyone likes being on very heavy doses of medication. So I really wanted to try and whittle that down. And I am very aware of the other two types of medication I'm on are actually attacking the disease, so to speak, whereas this one was just attacking the symptoms.
Yeah,
So I thought this is quite a safe bet to take myself off,
yeah,
because I can just put myself back on it. Whereas the other ones, which are attacking my immune system, there you can come off those because you feel good, then slip to or go back into a relapse, and then not take the drug like you did the first time. So I'm always a bit scared to change those. So that's why at the moment I'm sticking with my biologic, which is called Cosentex,
okay.
which is it was a loading phase of 2 injections every week for 5 weeks, and now it's just 1 injection a week, which I love. And it has to be refrigerated, which can kind of limit travel. But because it's one a month, it's much more doable and much easier.
Yeah.
And this is the first biologic which I felt like I've seen improvement on. So for me, it's really, really exciting. So that's actually was one of the main reasons why I decided to take myself off the other medication, was just because this one was starting to seem really effective. And then the other medication I'm on, my disease modifying, is methotrexate, which I'm
Yeah.
sure everyone knows. But that one, I actually very recently I was on the injection form of it, and it was very much like a almost like a build your own injection. I got sent everything individually and had to do it all and put it together. And if I'm being truly honest, the mental side of that actually just got a bit too tough for me. The whole day I dreaded doing it. The yellow liquid, I used to look at it and physically retch and gag. And I then started noticing that subconsciously every morning of the day that I was meant to inject, I would wake up and almost wake up in like wanting to retch and throw up.
Yeah.
And I obviously
I
it was all
bet.
psychosomatic, but it was just so brutal and so tough. And I think the injection form as well is obviously more potent than the tablet form, because it goes into your blood. And I think that was just giving me quite nasty side effects as well. So I was having lots of kind of mouth ulcers and just things that I didn't really want to deal with. So then I decided to come off injection form of that and go on to tablet form at the same time that I came off my other medication. So that's why recently I'm actually feeling so great about it, because in
Yeah.
my mind I'm seeing that I've come off half of my medication essentially, and then shifted the other half to a less potent and much more manageable form. And
Perfect.
that's really, really exciting for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. Coming off any medication is always a win. I know that myself, and yeah, it's always a big step when you come off anything.
Yeah.
So I've got a minute or so on this recording. So the last thing that I did want to ask you, is just a quick question on you obviously quite inspiring actually in terms of your
Thank
attitude.
you.
Your attitude is spot on when it comes to it. You're perfect when it comes to that. You actually inspire me a lot. I've been watching your stuff on Instagram, and I'd recommend anybody that's following you, sorry, anybody that's watching this podcast to follow you, because
Appreciate
you
that.
wouldn't know you've got the condition to watch what you do. It's unbelievable stuff that you're doing. Production of it is spot on as well. It's really, really good stuff. If you was to just say, kind of to sum it up in, 30 seconds or so, what would you say to anybody that is, at that beginner stage, feel like they can't do something, but they want to get into sports? What would be your final words to them?
I said be kind to yourself. I know that the desire to get back into sport can be so overwhelming that but you don't want to push yourself into something that will hurt. So, for example, I really wanted to get into jiu-jitsu, and after 2 sessions, just kind of laughed at myself and thought, God, Barnaby, this is not a sport for someone with arthritis. So, for sure, get into sport, but just be sensible and don't overdo it. I've said it before in this podcast, but it's something that we will have for the rest of our life, and you have to be aware of that. And you don't want to make a very rushed decision, which will or could impact you for years and years down the line. So I think that's always the hard thing to do is don't get too excited by it. And I know we've spoken about it before, and even so now when I'm talking about my excitement of this kind of this improvement that I've seen, always be aware that the next day you can slip, and that's no reflection on you or your lifestyle or something you've done wrong. It's just something you have to be aware of. And I think for new people being diagnosed, that's so important, because it's something that when I was really early doors, every time I slipped, I just thought I was back to square one. And actually, you're not. You're just taking one tiny, tiny little step back, and you need those. And I think, yeah, that's one of the big ones is if you think that you're back at square one, just don't get stressed, because that'll make it worse. Just allow yourself to be sore, allow kind of the pain and bewilderment, and just let it be there. And then hopefully by the next day, you'll be feeling great again.
Yeah.
And yeah, just kind of being kind on yourself, I think, is one of the biggest ones. Just really be kind on yourself and put yourself first.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. I know there's a lot
Of
more out
course.
there to be seen. I know it's always very difficult with such a big condition in your life to go through every single aspect of it, but I think what you've gone through is perfect, and people are really going to take a lot away from it. And I've said that just a moment ago, you are inspiring. I think what you're doing is really, really good for the condition, for anybody else with this condition, and just in general for the sport. And I hope you get that sponsorship. Obviously, I'm going to be keeping
Thank you
you
so
posted,
much.
and I hope to, yeah, I hope to see more of it. But yeah, thanks for your time today, and yeah, speak soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adam. That was great.
Cheers.
Have an amazing rest of your night.
You too. Bye
See
now.
ya.
Bye.